Well, hello, avid readers. I am so excited to be here. And I'm Trisha Goyer, and I'm actually here with Jasmine Fisher, who she writes by JJ. So this is her book we're going to be talking about, and I'm so excited about it. But welcome, Jasmine.
Oh, it's so wonderful to be here, Trisha. Thank you so much for having me. And yeah, it's so lovely to talk about Claw today, talk all things books.
Yes, I love talking books. I love your book, which we're going to get to in a minute. But first, if you're listening, you might notice that Jasmine has a really cool accent. So Jasmine
I
told
didn't have an
me, yeah.
accent.
You think I have an accent. Tell us where you're from and a little bit about yourself.
Yeah. So I live about an hour and a half north of Sydney, Australia. I never think I have an accent. It's always like you hear other people's accents, but then you jump on a plane and you're like, oh yeah, okay, I can hear it now.
Yes.
But yeah, so live Sydney, Australia, born in Australia. Have sort of grown up in the Blue Mountains, not far from where I live now. Married to David for nearly 9 years. I call him Dave, but I feel like I should always introduce him as David. So been writing since I was 14, and I'm 30 now, so a while.
I love it.
Yeah, what else would you like to know?
Well, okay, so we're going to talk about Keller today. And I have to say, I am so impressed. So, this is the first book that I've read, and I started reading, I'm like, she could write. Like, she could really write. And then I started listening to the audiobook because this is me. I start reading, and then it goes too slow because when I'm driving or cooking or doing any of those things, I want to keep up with the story. So I started listening to it, and again, just blown away by the world you created, the memory sifting and selling and buying thing that you created. So first of all, just give us like a little, maybe 1 minute overview of what the book is about. Then I want to talk about the pieces because my mind is like blown because it's so many amazing elements all in one book.
Oh, I'm so glad you like it. That means a lot. I'm blushing now. I'm gonna have
Yes.
to fan myself.
Yes.
So Claw kind of I guess came out of a few different things. So I'm originally a psychologist by trade, and that was sort of my whole background. And so I love, I guess, bringing in, and that's something that you'll see in the book is I love bringing in the psychological themes and kind
Yes.
of melding that with the fantasy. And I guess my work isn't your typical fantasy. A lot of people sort of don't normally read fantasy. I've really liked it, I think, because it's a little bit more historical fiction and kind of everything sort of rolled into one. But yeah, sort of playing around with the idea of memory and this whole idea of a post-apocalyptic society where potentially in the future the world has ended and people sort of have lost access to the world that was, so the world as we know it now, and that is only really preserved in memories. And so yeah, the main character Stephanie Winter, she has this ability to be able to extract memories, to manipulate them, to sort of edit them a bit, and that's a temporary thing. So originally eventually, the effects of that will fade. But yeah, she's able to sort of have this gift to change sort of memories for people. And so obviously that has a darker aspect in this post-apocalyptic society where nostalgia has become this sort of currency. And yeah, there's sort of things being bought and sold, and definitely the sort of the grimmer side of that. But yeah, I was thinking as well about Hans Christian Andersen's tale, The Nightingale. I'm not sure if you read it, but it's amazing. It's an amazing tale and just so poignant and so deep, I thought, in terms of some of the Christian themes there. And I guess this idea that we can come to love the illusion so much better than the real thing. We can come to sort of, I guess, see reality. Like it's really sort of construction of reality, if that makes sense. So yeah, so sort of toying with those ideas, and originally I was sort of using that as an inspiration, but that sort of eventually became a much bigger part of the book. And so as you can see, it's called the Nightingale trilogy. I'm sort of very directly referencing that. And there's also sort of Greek myth in there, Hades, Persephone, that kind of thing. So there's a few different things that I was playing around with. Yeah.
It's just so fascinating because it's like this amazing world that you build. And then there's this cerebral part of it, the memories and the sifting, and then you introduce different types of characters that really pull you in to talk. Let's talk a little bit about, let's talk about the memory sifting first. There's so many ways that we could go, but let's talk about the memory sifting first, because when you mentioned you have a background in psychology, all of a sudden the light bulbs went off because we've adopted 7 children. And so much of the actions and reactions, like, you know, I just thought, and some of them we adopted as teenagers. So I'm just thinking, like, we're in a good home now, you're safe, like, you shouldn't have the same reactions and struggles. But I realized, I learned right away, I wrote a book about actually calming angry kids, about when something happens in the moment, it's not what's happening in the moment, it's what happened in the past. And even if they can't clearly remember, there's a trigger that happens, and then there's this ripple effect that, you know, so as I'm reading, so all of a sudden when you said psychology, as I'm reading, I'm like, oh, I wish I could sit through some of their memories and like stuff out that just hurts them, because it's things that, you know, pain they face that I wish we could erase. And we'll see, you know, going through the book, it's not like you can even really erase those things. Even for a time, there might be some relief, but there's these deeper elements to it. And so much of it, as I'm reading and going along with your story, this is what's clicking in my head of, there are people that have faced hard things, either things that they did or things done to them. And it's so interesting, this, you know, sharing memories, taking memories, or selling memories, or just sharing, like that near the beginning is the strawberry, this memory of the strawberry. And I didn't even think about, like, oh, I guess you do like store the taste and the memory of all these things. So even as, I think, someone who's interested in psychology or how the mind works, or anyone that's just the reality of those things, is so interesting. So even though you have all this action going on, it just really is a book that is thoughtful and makes you think and makes you consider your memories and the memories of others. Is that things that you were like thinking about when you were writing it, that it was going to have this whole level of kind of the psychology moments where you're helping us understand ourselves better through our memories?
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. And that's always kind of one of my aims, is sort of to bring, I guess, the reality back into fantasy. And you're always playing around with that in fantasy. You're always kind of going, okay, you know, how can I show the familiar in a way that is strange, you know, and strange becomes familiar, and all that kind of thing. So you can always see parts of ourselves in fantasy worlds, which is why I love the genre so much. But yeah, absolutely, was really sort of wanting to bring that in. And I've worked with so many people with trauma backgrounds, and just really struggling with things, like you said, that have happened to them in the past. And you wish that sometimes, even if you don't have a trauma background, you wish, oh, if I could just delete that moment when that happened, or I could cling to this moment here, or I could hoard this moment forever. And I love, obviously, C.S. Lewis, huge inspiration for me, and he speaks about that in The Weight of Glory. And you know, this idea that when we're holding on to that, when we're trying to hoard certain experiences, what we're trying to ultimately do is to grasp hold of eternity, the eternity that God set in our hearts. And so that was kind of where it was the intersection of the fantasy and the psychology, and ultimately my faith, and sort of bringing that in, and sort of recognizing that longing to hold on to the good things is a part of our longing for heaven. And so there is, those direct spiritual themes in the book as well.
Oh, I love that so much. Okay, so we have Stephanie. Is that who's her name? Stephanie?
Yes, so Stephanie Winter's the female main character. We've got Dorian Ashwood, or Lord Adamo. He's the male main character, and he's someone who has a massive trauma past. You want to give him a hug, and he can also be frustrating. If you read as a kind of message me saying, I just want to punch him and hug him at the same time. And I'm like, yes,
that's a good character, great. Though, right? Because it's that complex character.
Exactly. It's striking emotional chord. But yeah, so he's got this awful past. His wife and his daughter have been murdered. Horrific circumstances. And so he comes to Stephanie to try and erase that background and to try and, forget that they've ever existed, not just have a temporary forgetting, but to make that permanent. And so there's this hunt for this ancient relic that's going to help them to make the changes permanent, to be able to forget memories, and then for Stephanie, because she's grown up an orphan and a slave, for her to be able to remember her family as well. So there's a bit of a forgetting, remembering, a bit of a balance there. Interesting.
The contrast of it. Yeah, so good. So how did you come up with your characters? Because you have some unique characters in there too. So talk a little bit about that.
So I think the main characters are often sort of parts of me that I sort of tease out. Not strictly. I think some people read my books and like, is this what's inside your head?
What's going on in there?
This is a dark place, especially my first 2 books. There's a lot of pain and suffering there before it sort of ended well. But yeah, so I often sort of tease out things that I'm struggling with my own life. So in my first 2 books, it was sort of teasing out some of the suffering that I'd gone through in my journey with chronic illness and husband having cancer and a few other things. And so this book was really, I guess, trying to play out some of those ideas that I'd been sort of wrestling with in my faith and in my life. And so Stephanie, she's a person she's kind of an old soul. She's someone who really feels deeply. She loves deeply. She cares, and she wants to take on the pain of everyone around her. And I really relate to that. I'm a person. I'm a deep empath. I just, bleed for people. I'm a heart on my sleeve kind of person. And so I kind of poured a little bit of that into her, but into Dorian, the male main character as well. A bit of his kind of, I guess he's had some hurt and he's sort of withdrawn a little bit from the world. He's sort of protecting himself. He's a bit cynical and he's sort of reluctant to hope again. So sort of, if you like, sort of pulling out 2 sides of my brain and sort of, sort of having them. That's what I love to do anyway in terms of characters, is to have a little bit of call it a dialectic in psychology. Sort of, 2 sort of opposing sorts of things and sort of drop them in together and see where they get to.
I love that. So what are some of the other characters that you have? So I'm going to show the cover again, which the cover is so amazing. I mean, it's so
Kirk DuPont's, right? He's just absolutely magical. He was actually my dream cover designer, and when that cover landed in my inbox, I was like, oh, it's so beautiful.
It's so gorgeous. He sent some of my covers too, and I just love him.
Did
He's
he?
so great. Yeah.
Yeah. He's just a long time dream for me to have a cover by him, and now I'm like, could have 3. So yes, I've actually got character art that's been done. So as you can see,
that's what I was hoping you would.
But yes, I've got Stephanie, obviously, and she's
really
so
cool with her white hair. I love it.
Iridescent hair. I was like, I always wanted to have a character with iridescent hair, and she's got this cool necklace as well, which you can see. It's sort of like flowers trapped in resin. And then I've got obviously Dorian. Got a really cool brooch. I don't know if you can sort of really see that. And then this character, Cass, his name is, or Cassius. He just sort of waltzed onto the page, and he's like, this is how I'm going to be. And,
I love that.
He's a character I really disliked at first because he's a womanizing character. And I was like, I don't like womanizing characters. And I was like, you just really annoy me and I don't like your story. But anyway, he sort of, I guess, popped onto the page and was like, this is my background. And I sort of was teasing that out a little bit. And I got to kind of unpack a bit of where he was from and where he was going. So
I think it's so funny when fiction writers say, like, I didn't expect this, and like he popped on the stage and then this happened, and people are like, it's from your head, but it's so true that all of a sudden it's there and you're like, who are you, or why are you like this, or what's going on? It's just like, it's amazing how our minds can do that, and it's building these things and we don't even know where it comes from sometimes.
Oh, totally. Yeah, no, we literally sound like we've got 10 personalities in our head, so it's really worrisome. But And then the last of all is Jewel. Obviously, she's a white wolf.
Yes.
She's everyone's favorite, I think, so far. I think if you put an animal in a story, it's like an instant favorite. I didn't realize how much people would be gunning for her, but she's
and
great.
that's what, because I went over just to look at Amazon, like, oh, what are people saying? This is what everyone's talking about. Yes, the wolf. For sure. I love it. But the other characters are just as amazing, so don't feel like this is all about. But the funny thing is, so it wasn't until like a year and a half ago that I even started reading speculative fiction, fantasy and dystopian and sci-fi and all these things, and I am so amazed by the writing and the characters and the layering that you do. So you have this dystopian type world, the world has ended, all these things are in their memories, and you have these unique characters, you have a wolf who's a character. It's just amazing how you're able to weave these together. So I'm curious, okay, you talked about this being book one. I would love to hear a little bit more about the books. Amanda said, I tried explaining that to my son and he asked me if I had schizophrenia. Yeah, exactly. It's like
fellow writer problems.
Just come in our mind. I don't know where they came from. It's not schizophrenia, it's just creativity, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Pure creativity.
Yeah. So tell us a little bit like about the series, and because I know I'm not all the way done yet, but I know as soon I'll be like, okay, how long? I'll be counting off the days on the calendar, like how long to make you get the next one. So in general, like don't give too much away, but tell us in generally what we can expect from this series.
Coming soon, yeah. So it's the first of a trilogy. So this is just released last week. So we've got one coming next December, and then the December afterwards, which I told my mother-in-law that because she's been reading it, and she's like, "Really, December? Come on, you're killing me." But yeah, so it will be sort of like a year apart for each of them, and yeah, there's an unfolding story. There's some unfolding spiritual, allegorical themes that will come out. And you'll get to see the characters kind of in greater depth and going through their arcs. I will say, if you get frustrated with any of them, don't give up on them. I saw a few reviews like, Cass, don't give up on him. He's going to get there, I promise.
Yeah, I love that. But they have to get low before when you need to get them down there. Then before you can have that redemption arc or however you're going to pull them out of it.
Exactly. Yeah. So yes, I'm sorry in advance to make you wait another year, but lots of other Enclave books in the meantime. They're amazing.
Yeah, I love that. Okay, so you talked about the spiritual arc, and I think one of the things I love is that we can share these spiritual truths through the lives of these characters. So it's not like a sermon where like, this is what the Bible says and blah, 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 or even, good quotes or whatever. We get to see these truths lived out in the lives of our characters. So what are some of the truths or the things that were in your mind, faith or love or whatever those are? What were the things that were really standing out to you as you work on this series?
Yeah, absolutely. That's an awesome question. I think really hope has probably emerged as one of the main themes. That whole idea of, how much do we, there's so much beauty in the world and there's so many good things, so many wonderful things that, are in our world. And that's sort of like this post-apocalyptic society that is like they're looking back on us, if you can imagine, kind of seeing some of the amazing things. And obviously strawberries is the example in the first chapter of that memory. But yeah, there's sort of beautiful things, but I guess that kind of idea of not to cling to that, there is reason to hope, but that is kind of not where we put or invest our hope ultimately. So that's sort of where it's sort of going to be heading in terms of the story, but also that balance not to give up on people. If you have encountered disappointment or tragedy, not to give up on life. I myself, I've battled depression in my chronic illness journey, and there's those moments where you're at the bottom of the pit and you're like, look, how can this get better? How can this improve? All the good times in my life are behind me, and you can't sort of see that future. So it's a little bit of that. There's that interplay. There's a few countries in the world, and some of them are future inclined, some of them are sort of looking back on the past and the glory days, and some of them are completely in the present. And so it's kind of like, how do we, as Christians, how do we sort of live in the present and be in the here and now, but be looking forward to eternity and seeing God's plan unraveling throughout history. And so, so that's really something that will probably be the main theme of the trilogy, is the main theme of the trilogy. They're all written. So
I love that.
Editors might change things, but for the most part, they're there. So,
and I love that. And what I love is, like, so many times, like, we go through things in life and we're like, God, like, why are we going through this? This is really hard, and other people don't have to face these things. And that God is able to use these because of your struggles. You mentioned your husband's struggles, like the truths you've learned, the experiences. I mean, it's not like a biography, but or autobiography, you're able to weave these things into books. And I know so many times, like, I'm amazed what ends up coming out in the books. I'm like, oh yeah, I guess that's what God's been trying to teach me. Like, in the process of writing, it's like working out the lessons or what God's been doing, or we see things differently. Has that been part of your journey as a writer, as you're putting these characters in these situations and dealing with these concepts like memories and forgetting and remembering and all these things? Have you seen your maybe growth in your Christian faith through your writing?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I often say writing is the best form of therapy.
I agree.
It's rather cheap therapy too. I can say that because I'm outside. But it's wonderful because I guess you can, touch your heart. As you're wrestling through things in your head, you're exploring that on paper, and you can sort of tease out things with characters. It's great being able to project stuff onto characters and, like, you deal with it, I don't want to deal with it. So yes, absolutely, it's hugely grown me. And I find that when I get to an end of a book wrestling with something particular in my faith or in my life, I feel like I've sort of resolved it in my head, my suffering journey, or not that that's ever completely, obviously you still have things that make you go, oh God, what about this? That's just dropped into my life, and you sort of go through the whole process again. But for the most part, I feel like it helps you learn things in a truer sense. Yeah, it's sort of something that, and C.S. Lewis spoke a lot about that, of course. And, we speak to our hearts through fiction sometimes, which is beautiful. That's why I'm such a big believer in Christian fiction. Yeah,
absolutely. Yeah. And I think it's such a good book. Like, this would be good. I was thinking about it. So my husband saw it on my nightstand, and he was like checking it out. I'm like, I will let you read it, but you can't yet, because I'm going to do an interview and I need to talk to Jasmine, and you can't have it yet. So I know my husband was already eyeing it. I was in the car today, took my 12-year-old orthodontist. He was listening and into it. And then I actually have been reading it very gently. I'm like, I might be able to give this to a gift, because I'm also listening to it on audiobook, which the audiobook is excellent. So I'm like, if I am really gentle, because it's hardcover, it looks brand new. Like, they hold up so well. I'm like, I could probably gift this to somebody. I know five people that would love it. I might have to buy some more copies. But what I love is that, yes, my 12-year-old listened to it. There's not going to be like horrible junk. I mean, there's hard stuff in there, but it's not like, nothing you would want them to read. Or my 15-year-old daughter, or my 17-year-old daughter, or my 33-year-old son. Like, there's so many people that would be interested in the story, because first of all, it's well written, but that fantasy dystopian type of book is where I'm interested. But like, my husband's like, hey, what is this? I want to read it. It's like able to reach a lot of readers, where I think sometimes, a Bible study, or, we invite someone to church and they might not be interested, but if they saw this, they're like, hey, there's a wolf on the front, and what is this memory thing going on? They're able to get, like, the story is able to speak to their heart sometimes in ways through fiction that, if they aren't going to watch a sermon on TV or listen to a Christian song, but we can use fiction to reach them.
Absolutely. I think there's a wonderful saying, and excuse me if I don't get it completely word for word, but fiction is fact masquerading as truth. And it's just really encapsulates that idea that we're so teachable through stories. It's wonderful. So that's awesome, and I hope they like it. I hope it's extended family and everyone enjoys the story.
Exactly. We're gonna have family around talking about that, which we already do. We love talking about books and movies and all those things. I would love to hear how you became a writer, because and then especially like a speculative fiction writer. So just tell us a little bit about that story.
Yeah. So I always say that my first kind of foray into the world of writing was in kindergarten, I think, when I was sort of co-writing a book with a mentor from year 6. I'm not sure if you call the years the same, so excuse me.
Okay, yeah.
That makes sense. But yeah, so a sort of older sort of preteen sort of mentor, and we co-wrote this zoo anthology. And it was just amazing. At the time, I was like, "Oh, this is going to be a bestseller. This is great." It was like 5 years old, and so I guess that's probably where I caught the writing bug a little bit. And my sister and I were both massive readers, just devoured stories, particularly fantasy, obviously Lewis and Tolkien and a whole heap of others, John White, Tower of Babura series. That's a bit of an oldie now. Don't hear a lot of people talking about it, but those are some of the stories that we got into. And then I had a dream when I was 14 years old. My family was on a trip around Australia, and we were staying in this place in Western Australia on the coast. Had this dream that was the opening scene for a novel, and I went, oh, this is kind of cool. So anyway, that ended up becoming the opening scene for my first book, which is published now. So it was this cool kind of moment. And to be honest, the original idea was very cliched and it evolved a lot throughout time. Fast forward about 12 years or so 26, 27, I was working as a psychologist. And I got sick pretty much overnight. Sort of had some lingering symptoms for a few months, but I got really sick and had to walk away from my job, basically from one day to the next. And so that was devastating. I'd studied for 7 years at uni, and 13 years at school. So it's like 20 years of education all up, and you're like, it's all sort of fallen flat. God, what's your purpose in this? So anyway, I had sort of kept on writing that book, and had never finished it. I was sort of in that phase where you just read what you've written, you're like, oh, that's all right, that's really bad. We'll never let that see the light of day. So I ended up finishing that just on some of my good days there, throughout illness, and ended up publishing that, and then wrote the sequel. And as we speak, I'm writing book number 9 in the order. So I've just kind of kept on going. I'm not working as a psychologist anymore. I've sort of segued into freelance editing and writing nonstop, which is wonderful. I'm doing a few different bits and pieces and some stuff for church, which is really, really fun. Keeps me out of trouble. It's been such a journey I think at the time it felt like God had stripped away everything that had made me, and all the hopes and dreams and plans that I'd had for the future. And I was like, oh, what's your purpose here? But I think God was able to really use that. And I've loved writing. I've loved editing. It's just amazing getting to spend your time around books all day, every day.
That's that moment when you think it's all stripped away. It's like you couldn't see ahead to see that there's so much more. And then these amazing books. And I mean, you definitely see that psychology aspect, like I was mentioning, come through in this book. So I just love how even you're able to use that. So how did you connect with Enclave when you're in Australia and they're here for this series?
So I've been following, so I joined Realm Makers, which is the Christian fiction fantasy group on Facebook. Had obviously just seen all the Enclave books being published, and just going, wow, these guys are amazing. Their stories are incredible. Following a lot of the different authors, seeing their covers, I was like, oh gosh, they're so beautiful. It was also part of avid readers and seeing some of those amazing books and really deep diving into Christian fiction. So that was the first time I'd really sort of gotten into it. And so then sort of had a friend published with Enclave. So Kristen Young is actually a friend of mine. So and Chris had been raving about Enclave and these guys are amazing. And I was like, yeah, they look amazing. And so it was always a dream to publish with them. And so I felt Claw was the right story to publish with them too. And Steve sort of emailed and said, like to publish this in the summer. And I was actually cooking dinner at the time when I got the email.
My goodness.
And I pretty much nearly burnt it. I was like, and obviously
it's like forget dinner when you get a call from Enclave. It's like
don't check your emails while you're cooking dinner. It is not a good idea. But I do it all the time. I'm like, I'm just stirring,
I love that.
Yeah, that was a journey. But Enclave, they've been amazing to work with. They're just absolute dreams. So
and it's just amazing how the quality of the books they turn out is just so good. I mean, for all the different genres, like the writing quality, the cover quality, I've enjoyed it so much. And so I know a lot of people don't know where to go get books in this genre. Definitely go to Enclave and definitely check out this one. This is for sure. Like if you have anyone that loves any type of speculative fiction, I highly recommend this. Can't say that enough because I'm impressed. I'm impressed a lot. So I also want to ask, I always love to ask, what Christian fiction books have you enjoyed? Because I know as soon as people watch this video, they love at the end that they start making the list. Of course, it's this one, but what other things can you recommend Christian fiction?
So I guess going by genre, so I'm a huge fan of originally Christie. That was absolutely profound for me when I was thinking through things about suffering. So I know that's like kind of the cheap answer because that's what we'll all say, right? Love Francine Rivers, love Tamara Alexander, Joanna Davidson Politano. One of her books, A Rumored Fortune, just was such a big part of me sort of grappling through. She has this lovely extended metaphor in her book of the branches and the vine, John 15, and just unraveling that in a story kind of way. Wow. It's just beautiful. I love the spiritual content of her books, and obviously fantasy. Morgan Bussey. I'm saying that right.
Yes, but you are.
Lindsay Franklin, Catherine Crum, Ashley Bustamante. It's just so many there's
and I've read all of those books that you've just mentioned, all of those in the last year. So I'm giving thumbs up here.
They're just this, and I'm gonna miss so many in that.
Well, you mentioned Kristen Young. I loved her books. Kristen Young's. It's so funny. Her Love Collective. Every time people are like, everything's fine, we're like, my husband and I were like, the Love Collective. Everything's doing well. I can just picture once you read Kristen's book, it's just in your mind, the Love Collective.
Yes. It's so, the themes are so profound, aren't they, in terms of what we're seeing as a society. And it's amazing how they speak into all the different things, the different forces. So too many to name. And if I cheat and look at my bookshelf, Tracy Higley as well. I love the
Tracy Higley is a good friend of mine.
She's got a new one, The Garden in the I'm gonna massacre it. In the Garden
of wait, I gotta look it up now.
In the Garden of Deep Time, is that it?
The Garden.
And I saw it and I just went, I need this. And Kathy was messaging me and saying, you got to read this. I was like, I want to read it. I need it now. So is it in the Garden of Deep Time?
I think so. I'm looking now, and it's of course it's not. And the cover is really good too.
Oh, amazing cover.
Yeah, where is it? The Nightfall in the Garden of Deep Time.
Nightfall. I missed that.
Yeah, Nightfall in the Garden of Deep Time. The cover is amazing. Yeah, Tracy's a really good friend of mine. I've known her for 25 years. I'll have to ask. I just saw her again this summer. We've known each other for a really long time. So this is the fun thing. And now I know Jasmine. The fun, amazing thing, if you don't know the Christian writing world, like everyone, you mentioned Kathy and Kristen. I mean, once you become friends, like everyone just loves each other and cheers each other on and supports each other. So I'm glad, Jasmine, I got to meet you, and now I get to like celebrate when you have a new book out, and I'll be looking forward to next December, which December is perfect, like Christmas shopping season.
Oh, totally. And wintry Christmas kind of feels.
Yes, exactly. But okay, we were just talking before this aired, and so Jasmine's in Australia, so it's like summer there. It's like warm, and we're like cold and gloomy, and and it's also tomorrow. She's a day ahead of me. She said tomorrow's looking great. So
I'm coming from the future. It's all good so far.
It's all good.
But yes, it is a bit strange. Nearly 30 degrees Celsius. I don't know what that is in Fahrenheit. Sorry, I've never been able to convert the two in my head. But yes, it's hot outside.
It's hot outside. Yeah, I love it. Well, it's so cool that we're able to talk books, and I mean across. I don't even know how many miles that would be. So we're able to share books and talk stories, and I just appreciate you being here. So Jasmine, for people who want to connect with you and want to just keep track of all your books, where can they go to find information about you?
So probably the best place is my website, www.jjfischer.com, obviously Fisher with a C. Or you can find me on Goodreads, Instagram, Facebook. I am on Twitter. I don't really post on Twitter these days. So, very minimal presence there. But post a lot on Instagram and Facebook, and BookBub as well. So all the sites if you want to connect
all the places.
Send me a message. Love to hear from you. I always love getting emails from readers saying, I just want to throttle this character, or give this one a big hug. And I'm like, me too.
I understand. Yeah, and I did want to mention Enclave Publishing is just at enclave.publishing. And you can find that's on Facebook, and they're on Instagram, and they are the publisher, which again, great book. I am so impressed. I love the writing, I love the story, and I love meeting you. So Jasmine, thank you for being here today.
Thank you so much, and so lovely meeting you face to face. And it's awesome getting to talk books.
We'll have to talk about book two.
Totally. And I hope you enjoy the rest. And I look forward to actually listening all the way through the audiobook, which I haven't yet. But Stacey is amazing. She's done an incredible job.
So I'm enjoying it. All right, thank you so much.
Oh, that's awesome. Thanks, Trisha. And thank you everyone for listening. Just looking